homeschool her, but
No, and had her.
well, I'll try, but yeah, I don't know.
This meeting of the Board of Education is now called to order. Please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome everyone to our meeting tonight. We'll get started by approving our agenda. Any changes to the agenda as printed? Hearing nothing, is there a motion, please, on page 2?
Mr. President, Van Antwerp, I make the motion that the Board of Education approve the agenda as printed.
Thank you, Keith. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Emily, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion passes, and we'll move forward like we always do with the superintendent's report. Mark?
Thank you, Randy. We have several reports on there, and the first one we kind of just, as we normally do, we switch the order around of a presentation so we could hear this first, and if the board so chooses, you can act on this first one, but it's the proposed student trip to France. So, Dr. Pasco, you gonna do the introduction, please?
Jamie, in a second. Yeah. Good evening, Superintendent Beelang and trustees. We have Jamie Hoekstra here today from Northern High School. Jamie, come on up. She's going to talk a little bit about the planned trip in 2025 through the French class to France. So, Jamie, it's all yours.
All right, so the trip will be through the organization World Strides. The tour itself is called La Belle France. The trip departure dates are from June 16th, 2025, returning on June 24th, 2025. 9 days total, which does include travel. Leaving through the Detroit airport, participants are expected to meet at the transport, or have transportation set up for them to arrive at the airport, and we do organize like carpools and stuff like that. For the agenda on the trip, we'll be in Paris for about 4 days, seeing some of the really popular sites like Arc de Triomphe, the Eiffel Tower, Notre Dame, the Louvre, Sacré-Cœur, and Versailles. Then we'll go to the Loire Valley for about 2 days and look at 3 different chateaus in that area, where we'll end our trip from there in Saint-Malo, and we'll go to a D-Day museum, American Military Cemetery, and a memorial visit at École-Ville-sur-Mer, which is another very popular site. From there, we go back to Paris, where we will return back to Detroit. For this trip, it's for students who have passed with a C or better in French 3, either that same year or in previous years. The total for the trip is, at this point, just over 4,000, so it's a little bit steep for some of our students. We are hoping to get around 6 participants so that it would cover a chaperone position. As for the experiences involved with the trip, obviously the children will be able to practice their language and get hands-on with the culture. The organization of World Strides, which Portage, I believe, has approved us a couple trips before, does have LEAP activities, which are educational in purpose, and they also have a whole bunch of different activities planned. The hotels are 3 to 4 star rated. The price includes all meals but lunch and souvenirs. And then outside of the trip, there are academic abilities for students to get 3 college credits up to, they have to apply for that 6 months after the trip has finished. For safety procedures and whatnot throughout the tour, we do have a 24/7 tour guide with us who has access and training to an emergency manual. There's also an on-call doctor, access to mental health services, and they also have liability insurance automatically for all travelers. Thank you.
Hold on, Jamie.
Sorry.
They're excited. They want to say things.
Thank you very much. You did great. I just wanted to mention, I love that you're using World Strides because of offering that college credit. And I hope that the students who participate take up on that opportunity, take advantage of that opportunity. Because there is so much learning that occurs during travel.
Mm-hmm. It's really exciting to see them actually be able to use what they've spent so much time and effort on. So.
Just wondering, has there been any discussion about offering the trip to kids at Central too? I know that's happened in the past to sort of beef up the group, and A couple of my kids had that opportunity, so I'm just curious.
Yeah, so I have talked with the teacher here, and they have decided they don't want to do combined trips anymore for personal reasons, I'm assuming. So trying to lead my own, hopeful to get at least 6 participants.
Yeah.
But it's hard for our kids because, it's that time period where it's like trip to France or a car. For a lot of them, and a lot of them choose car.
Okay, well, thank you for doing this. I've said many times, these trips are life-altering for kids, and I've seen it myself up close and personal, so thanks for taking the initiative and being willing to go out on a limb and do this for the kids.
I'm really hopeful that we can have it.
So I would encourage the kids to go for the trip to France behind door number 2. When I was 16 years old, I took the high school French class trip, and I think every site you listed in Paris we went to.
Yeah.
It was so cool. It was life-changing.
Yeah, it's they have no idea the age, right? There's nothing that old here, and we talk about the would you take it for granted if you lived here kind of discussion, and it kind of also brings that whole idea around that maybe we shouldn't take for granted what we have here too.
I saw that Mont Saint-Michel is on your, so that's an eye-opener.
Yep.
That's an eye-opener, and then when they go to D-Day, you've probably been to all these places yourself, but it's amazing how much respect and gratitude people there have for the Americans still. 70 years later, they're still talking about the Americans, so it'll be good for kids to see and hear that.
It's so eye-opening for them, especially when we go to the D-Day stuff and we see the bunkers, and they're like, wow, it really puts things from not just French class, but history class and other classes into perspective. So,
Great.
Thank you for doing all this work to put this together for our students. We appreciate it. And I think it'd be a really nice thing if the board is in agreement if we could approve this trip to France right now, so Jamie knows where she stands.
Was there a suggested motion?
Well, there isn't, but it'd be pretty simple on page
That we
44.
approve, there is under the action portion of it, I not put one in there.
I don't think so.
Emily's doing it on her own.
I move that we approve this trip.
I second.
Thank you very much for the detailed work on that motion. That's great. That's great. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion passes and the trip to France is on. Thank you very much.
Okay, the next 3 reports are all going to be spearheaded by Johnny Edwards, so there are 3 different topics that are all related to his area of operation. Johnny?
Thank you, Superintendent B-Lang, as well as members of the Board of Education. First, I want to just share a few photos as my update for this particular month. All right, so this particular month, we're now able to show an aerial view. Thank you to Anastasia, who I'll introduce momentarily, from AK. This is a nice bird's eye view of the construction. And what I wanted to just kind of share is how the outline of the building is taking place as it relates to the floor plan. So you can see more on the south side of the photo. You can see the gymnasium in the southwest corner. And then on the northern side of the site, you can see the learning communities as they are taking shape, and how students and staff will be able to exit out to those outdoor learning places. And then that wing that's kind of near the southeast corner goes from the main office to your art room as well as the library. So that's Central Elementary School. Here's another photo of Central Elementary. As you can see, more masonry work being undertaken, and it feels like each day those walls are getting higher and higher. Haverhill, as you know, we sequenced or staggered the construction project, so Haverhill does not have as much masonry. When you look at the outline of the school in terms of the footing and foundations, you'll see that building taking place. Again, on the northern side of the campus, you'll see the learning communities and how those match up to the first floor plan. And more on the south side of the campus will be the main office and as well as the cafeteria as well. So again, more of the footings and foundations work has been undertaken now, and hopefully the next time we show some photos, you'll start to see more of the walls taking place for there. So that's what's happening on the campuses. At Woodland, our next engagement session for Woodland is scheduled for next week. We are entering the schematic design for Woodland this week. It starts actually Friday. We've been working with all of our team members, administrators, and our staff, and we've also hit a pivotal point in our design process. We have been exploring the possibility of including early childhood or early learning inside of the Woodland School. As we've weighed the pros and cons of the early childhood, we believe it's in our best interest not to include it in Woodland, and some of our reasons why. One, we have several entities in the district providing early childhood services. That includes Curious Kids, Great Start Readiness, and Early Childhood Special Education, ECSE. Understanding the various needs of those programs, the Woodland site will not accommodate all of the spatial and classroom requirements. Secondly, as we've looked at Woodland site, we would not be able to accommodate all of the square footage that it needs on that site, therefore it would increase our traffic flow. And then third and finally, as we know, early childhood is a major topic at a state level as well. And as the state is still talking about areas around preschool for all, we want to give ourselves the most amount of flexibility with early childhood over the next several years without locking ourselves into a design path. So that concludes my report around the bond project updates, and I'll be happy to answer any questions before I go to change orders.
So will there be space for those programs that exist at Woodland now? Will they be able to be accommodated for the near future with planning that would be expansion space for that building in the long run? Or how is that going to all shake out, or do we even know?
So currently, right now, through our Great Start Readiness Partnership, we offer a couple of classrooms with GSRP, and we also offer Head Start programs. What we're exploring is the possibility of moving those particular programs when Woodland is relocated into Haverhill into our Curious Kids site at PCEC, and looking at ways in which we can somehow blend or incorporate some of those programs together, because they're serving similar children at a similar age group, and we want to be able to see if we can beef up our programming.
So would that turn that site into more of an early childhood site instead of being spread out at different schools, or what are you thinking?
When you say that site, would you say?
The Curious Kids site?
So the Curious Kids site, as you currently would see, one side of that is Curious Kids and the other side is Community High. There are classrooms available within the Curious Kids program that would be able to accommodate any classrooms that are displaced in early childhood from Woodland.
Okay.
Just to build on that, just remind the board that building does not have a long life, so that is not a permanent solution for any programs. We're still working that out. The only thing we've really at this point is eliminated is Woodland as a site for early childhood programming for the long run.
For the long run, right.
Any other questions before we talk about change orders? All right. Joining me tonight, we have a couple representatives from OAK, Dan Rathburn, who is project manager, and then also in the audience, David, who works with Dan on many of this work behind the scenes.
All the work for me.
So what I want to just share with the board, and Dan is going to explain the change orders, but we will be looking at change orders as well as budget summaries for the board and those impacts simultaneously. Given that we've started working through some of the change orders, we just wanted to bring a summary to the board now And then as we move forward, coming up with a rhythm for the board to see the budget summary as well as change order summaries.
Thank you, Johnny. So we will start out going to change orders for Central Elementary. And our first one is the removal of abandoned septic tanks. And we had a cost of $2,424 for that. At any point too, if you have any questions, please just stop me and I will answer them. So, moving over to number 2, Bulletin 1, updates to temporary playground and revised mechanical plumbing. That was $42,725. The mechanical plumbing was very small, that was only around $3,000. All the rest of the work went into the playground. Bulletin 3, interior scope changes and adjustments, shifted door locations and ceiling heights. We have a cost of $1,438 for that. Most of that work was LPDA work, that's lath, plaster, drywall, and acoustical. So they focus on walls and your acoustical ceilings. Number 4, after a review of remaining asphalt in the basketball court, it was determined to remove and replace the entire area. The cost of $23,855. Number 5 is Bulletin 4, deleted water main tie-in and fire door rating changes. Cost of $2,258. Number 6 is replacement of decomposed mulch on the playground, $8,629. And number 7 was revised masonry rebar spacing from 48 inches to 32 with a cost of $15,424. Total change orders at Central Elementary at $96,750. Any questions?
Is there a budget for change orders that is put in place like ahead of time so that you know if you're way over or under?
So depending on the change order, sometimes we do budget them.
Okay.
If the cost is out of line, we definitely budget them. We do have a very rigorous review process. So when we so the bulletins are architectural direction. The architect issues changes to the documents. OAK will review that after we get pricing from the subs. The architect reviews it after us. We also have Plant Moran looking at it before it comes to Johnny for.
Okay, so it's not a huge surprise that there's additional 96,000 that,
No,
okay,
no.
And also, Trustee Hamilton, we set aside a contingency
okay,
in the projects. And so the contingency dollars are earmarked for
Got it.
unforeseen changes. And when we go into the budget summary next calendar year, you'll be able to see how the contingency works with the overall budget.
The contingency, we treat that as a shared contingency. It's shared between the owner, the architect, and the construction manager. And really, when I say construction manager, I'm talking the contractors. So we share that. That allows the owner to make changes to scope. The architect has clarifications that there's gonna be. So as we go through these, you're gonna see a lot of structural clarifications, and you're also gonna see a lot of things related to code. A lot of times, you guys, at some point, will probably, you have in the past, asked the question, why wasn't this included in the drawings? When they interpret code, they're looking at it in your best interest. They're trying to interpret it to keep the cost as low as they can for you, and therefore, there's going to be some pushback from the state saying, no, we want to see more. So they're starting low and getting pushed high. And the stuff from us is going to be, there might be some scope gap or other items on our end. In addition to contingency, we also carry allowances. We carry allowances for things that we know are going to happen or that we're going to need, but we don't know the amounts. So some of those things will be popping up as we, right now, all of these costs that you're seeing are coming out of contingency.
thank you.
So just kind of on that, so would that be like a code issue for revised rebar spacing?
It's under a structural review, but it's very similar, yes.
So Dan, I don't know if I heard you mention, these change orders can come from a number of sources, including as owners, we can sometimes ask for a change to be made. Sometimes it's discovered in the field. Sometimes it's discovered through document reviews. So they come from a number of different areas, but all of them, no matter where they come from, are thoroughly vetted to make sure that they're needed, necessary.
And this is a regular occurrence throughout the construction project, so we'll regularly see this happen. Sometimes things come in less than what we expect to
Yes,
do.
sometimes.
So
I wish more,
we'll
but.
hope for more of those.
Yeah. And really, the use of contingency is risk management. And, right, we're putting that risk back into your court, our court, so that if we put it over to the contractors again, they're gonna not take the risk when they bid it, or take as little as possible, and their numbers would be higher, maybe unnecessarily.
Knowing that the best laid plans don't always work out as planned. Contingencies are, or change orders are normal. Totally accept that. But question, the updates to temporary playground, I noticed that's a rather large chunk of this. What does that involve?
Those are mostly enhancements to what was going in.
Okay.
with them.
And we're talking, and the temporary playground is the existing playground that the students are currently using right now. So for example, the mulch, we thought we could use most of the mulch that was already there. Yes, and there was a recommendation to add more for student safety. The temporary basketball court, we were doing the water main work and we were cutting and cutting so much around, we only had a small piece of concrete that was usable. So we made the decision for the students, let's just go ahead and replace that area. So that's some of the work that was involved in the playground for our students.
Okay, so those are listed, number 6 and
Number 6 is the mulch.
number 4, but
Number 4 is the asphalt.
So, let me go into a little
in number
bit
2, the updates to temporary playground, that's just a
So
large
what
portion.
we had is we had a new water main and sewer went through the existing asphalt and replaced the grass area with mulch, to prevent the area from staying muddy. Most of the cost was in the mulch and some asphalt.
That makes more sense. Thank you.
Yes. Any other questions?
Well, yeah, I mean, just big picture, so I'm just looking at you guys, and about half the board has not gone through this before, and about half has. But those who have gone through it has had the benefit of, A, the prior experience. But before we started, maybe back midpoint of last decade, we had some time in retreats where we just kind of went over, we just kind of covered some of the fundamentals, and it helped. So, you know, I mean, these questions are all good, but I think if you need some more additional, you know, raise your hand. Maybe we could do more to provide more background. Because it's disconcerting. You sit down and you look at these numbers just kind of rolling at us.
And as we continue to roll through these.
Right. This is the tip of the iceberg. We'll be doing this for years.
We'll move down to Haverhill. Item 1 for Haverhill, replacement of curb along Manhattan Street work. That's $35,890. And I'm gonna hit on number 2 before I elaborate on that, which is the replacement of concrete driveways along Manhattan Street work for $37,300. The reason for that is the existing piping that we were tying into was much deeper. And since we had to dig deeper, it slopes out further and we had to replace curbs and driveway that we weren't planning on. Item 3, a replacement of decomposed mulch on the playground, $16,335. And an existing piece of the water main was found to be cracked and had to be replaced. And this was not related to our contract work. They weren't working in the area, but we still found it. And that had a cost of $6,280. That put us at total changes for Haverhill of $95,805. Any questions on hearing?
Just commenting that having been involved with concrete driveways, putting in good concrete driveway, we got off easy, it sounds like.
Well, we did right by the neighbors, and that's good, right?
Good neighbor,
Yeah.
definitely. Good neighbor policy, and you did it
Good.
very low priced for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the third and final component of presentations tonight includes our building site and sinking fund. Join me, Alder Johnson, our Director of Finance. At our last meeting, I just kind of talked a little bit about building site and sinking fund. So today, Paul and I will go a little more in depth in terms of our building site and sinking fund. And at the end, you'll see a little bit about the timeline. All right. I've had several presentations, so I kind of put them together.
You need me to, I will.
No, it's okay. All right. So Portage originally levied its building site and sinking fund originally since 1966. We levied between 0.5 and 1.5 mils. Our last renewal was voted upon in November of 2019 at a 5-year duration. Our current levy is 0.4988. We collect approximately $1.5 million annually in taxes, and then it expires at the end of the next calendar.
There are hundreds of items that you can use a building site and sinking fund for. Now granted, the type of building site and sinking fund you have, we'll touch on that a little bit later in the presentation, but that's all driven by the language and the ballot language that goes to the voters. But some of the major projects that a building site and sinking fund can be used for are things like HVAC, roof repairs or replacements, hot water heaters, boilers. If you build an existing new parking lot, which we will show you a picture of here momentarily, what we've done over at Northern, that is eligible. Gym floor refinishing is eligible under a building site and sinking fund. Flooring is eligible under a building site and sinking fund, and so is fencing. So just to give you some visual aspects of some of the projects that have recently been completed using building site and sinking fund dollars. The stable over at, the stable located here on this campus, that floor was sanded down and refinished last year?
Yep, summer of 2023.
Summer of 23. So that's last fiscal year to me, so sorry. So that floor looks absolutely beautiful. And then I will probably not do a great job at explaining this, but I consider this to be a facelift at the front of Northern High, but it's a curtain wall project. And so building site and sinking fund dollars were able to be used to update that look of Northern High School.
And this photo was taken before the red brick was painted, so now if you were to drive past the campus, the brick is painted. That blends in more with that. And for many of our students, they feel like it's a renovation of some sort. It's great to have those dollars for that. Also, you'll see a couple pictures here. This is the igloo at Northern High School. This is their main competition gym. And also at Northern High School, before the lines were marked in the parking lot, this is the new parking lot that went in near the multi-purpose field and softball. Again, all of these projects were done through building site and sinking fund dollars, which alleviate pressure from the general fund.
If you do remember, just something I should have noted on the previous slide, when Kim Lindsay came in to present the audit, a building site and sinking fund does require it to have a special audit conducted on it. So that is also audited by our auditor. Building site and sinking funds, the look of a building site and sinking fund has changed over the years. When they first came out, you could only use the dollars to make real estate purchases for sites, do construction and repair of school buildings, but you had to be very cautious that you weren't doing items related to everyday maintenance. And there are letters out there from Treasury, Michigan Department of Treasury, that state
what you can use dollars for, so you always have to be very cautious that you're adhering to all of the Treasury letters. So anything that was authorized prior to March 29th, 2017 fell under this first category of a building site and sinking fund. Then the legislators went to work to make changes on what we could use building site and sinking fund dollars for. They changed the law, amended the law, so not only could you use building site and sinking fund dollars for what was approved previously, the real estate sites, the construction and repair, you could also now use it for school security improvements, and you could use it for acquisition or upgrading of technology. Now granted, a district would want to place this in the ballot language to the community that that's what they intend to use the dollars for. So then fast forward to just this past August of 2023, and yet another change has occurred with building site and sinking fund use dollars, expanding the scope even larger. Everything that was available prior to August 6th of 2023, but now you can,
Student transportation.
Sorry. You can now use it for student transportation vehicles and like buses or vans. And so they've widened that scope even more. So those are options that we have in running the ballot language that we need to take to the voters next year.
So September of 2023, our Facilities Committee convened, and we met and discussed some of the information that was shared tonight. We would like to bring a resolution to the board at our January 29th, 2024 meeting. And that resolution would include ballot language that would expand our uses of building site and sinking fund to include school security, technology, and student transportation vehicles. Currently, right now, we cannot use building site and sinking fund dollars for the technology, security, and transportation vehicles. A renewal of 0.5 mils, a duration of 5 years. If we were to move in this direction, we have to certify this with the city of Portage by February 13th, and then the election date for our community would be May 7th, 2024. So that concludes our presentation around building site and sinking fund, and we'll be happy to answer questions about building site and sinking fund.
Probably just not knowing as a new trustee question, but where is currently the student transportation vehicles, like money coming from right now?
Currently, right now, we use our bond dollars
Okay.
to pay for student transportation vehicles, namely school buses.
We use the bond dollars for the school buses, but any other vehicles outside of the school buses are purchased by the general fund.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really appealing to have that language so that those purchases could be made from building and site, because we won't always have bond funds to
Yeah.
do it, and it's preferable to keep it out of general, so we have money to pay staff and invest in learning recovery and all those really important things.
So, questions?
Well, I just want to say we certainly appreciate the community supporting this since 1966. I mean, it's just been key to keeping our buildings looking good and keeping our buildings safe, so we appreciate that support.
We'll bring the resolution to the board at the organizational meeting in January, and then for discussion, and then it'll be an action item at the last meeting in January. All right.
Basic school finance.
We'll move into our board education section of the agenda, and Dr. Jensenius is coming up alone to do this.
Good evening, Board of Trustees and Superintendent Beeling. I'm here tonight to present to you the elementary portion of Monitoring Report 1-1. This is the third year, of course, of us being organized by the high school October, the middle school data in November, and now the elementary data in December. Will be coming to you in January with overview of K-12. Tonight, we'll do an overview of the assessments utilized in monitoring report 1.1, some data highlights, and then our next steps that we've been working on at elementary. This should look familiar. At the elementary level, we use the following assessments. We use the Acadians for literacy and FastBridge for mathematics screeners from 5th through 5th grade. There are no comparable data or districts available for this screener data. We do also use the M-STEP ELA and math portions, 3rd through 5th grade, and then in 5th grade, we also assess science and social studies. The M-STEP is where we have our comparable districts coming into play here. So we're going to jump in with some data here. As we know, Acadians does make it easier for us as educators to detect in kindergarten through 6th grade students who are at risk for their early reading difficulties. This provides timely support and prevention. 3rd grade is really that key year for us to take a look at as we want to know where our students are at in terms of their oral reading fluency. So we take a look at advanced phonics, their word attack skills, their accurate and fluent reading of connected text, and reading comprehension. If we look at our data pre-pandemic from the 18-19 school year, end of school year, we had 74% of 3rd graders meeting that benchmark, compared to the year 2020 to 2021, where we were at 71% meeting benchmark, and then in 21-22, we had 68%. And for the 22-23 school year, last school year, we were back at 71%. So that was a 3% increase over last year. So we start to see that bounce a little bit there. Now we're going to take a look at 5th grade M-STEP, the ELA portion. Again, you've seen these graphs before, but I just want to make sure we review it. The vertical axis represents the percent of students proficient, in which we see that 55% of all 5th grade students tested in Portage Public Schools met the benchmark in ELA. That does place us 5th among our 8 comparable communities. If you take a look at the graph across the horizontal axis, you'll see those districts listed, and the state is on the far right. As you move along that horizontal axis from left to right, you are increasing the percent of students that receive our free and reduced lunch, which is our measure of the economically disadvantaged students that we serve. And if you want those numbers at the elementary level, you can write those down. Starting from left to right, we have Hudsonville at 22%, Zeeland is at 27%, Portage is at 31%, Huron Valley was 34%, Midland 35%, Traverse City 41%, Granville 42%, and Grand Blanc is 44%. So when we now take a look when we look at our economically disadvantaged students, 5th grade, we had a total of 634 5th graders take the assessment last spring, in which 199 of our students, or 31%, were considered economically disadvantaged. New students, our percent proficient is 32% compared to the state at 30% proficient. We are tied for 7th out of the 8 districts, and in 2022, we were also ranked 7th. That's information. Moving on, we now will take a look at individual groups of students. Our students who identify as white, the percent proficient is 59% compared to the state at 51%. For state accountability purposes, for the 7 other districts, Black African American groups were too small to have available scores. So we just need to make sure we point that out there. Our students who identify as Black or African American, the percent proficient is 18% compared to the state at 19%. Our students who identify other than white, the percent proficient is 46% compared to the state at 31%. So that is our ELA M-STEP data that you have in front of you. Moving on to the math portion, we'll take a look at 5th grade math. scores, our percent proficient is 38% compared to the state at 32%. We did tie for 5th out of our 8 districts up here. In 2022, we were also tied for 5th. The highest percent proficient in our comparable districts is 57%, while the lowest was at 37%. So you can see that range there. Moving on to our students that are economically disadvantaged. Again, we have about 31% considered economically disadvantaged. And the percent proficient is 19% compared to the state at 18%. And we were 7th out of the 8. And in 2022, we ranked 8th. The highest percent proficient in our comparable districts is 41%, while the lowest was at 18%. And the last piece of this data, again, is we'll look at individual groups of students taking the 5th grade math and stuff. And our students who are who identify as white, the percent proficient is 39% compared to the state at 39%. For state accountability purposes, again, 5 of the 7 Black African American groups were too small to have those scores as well. The students who identify as Black African American, the percent proficient is 9% compared to the state at 7%. And our students who identify other than white, the percent proficient is 34% compared to the state at 19%. This next graph, I think is a really, or piece of data here actually is a really important piece of data that we use to really answer that question of, are we making growth? Are we growing? And to set the stage, I want to kind of give you a little bit of background here that we know that there was no state level accountability for the testing data for the 2020-2021 school year, and there were no state assessments given in 2020. This is important because of how they had to calculate all this and why we didn't have school data up here. So this means that the state did not calculate student growth percentiles, SGPs, for 4th and 5th graders in the years 2020 or 2022. And in 2021, the assessment results were skewed. Therefore, the 2023 student growth percentiles are calculated using only the 2022 assessments and are compared to the 2019 SGPs. So that's a lot to say there, that because we had some gaps in those testing windows and you have to have 2 years of student data, this is what we're able to now compare. So we actually are getting back on track to be able to see growth, and that's why this is an important one for us. So when you look at this graph, it's important to know that 40 or greater SGP, or the student growth percentile, means that the students are making average or better growth. And that number is set by the state. So on this graph, when we see 60% or more of our students hitting that target of 40, we're identifying that as an expected percentage making average or better gains. So we're starting to see some green up there, that we're seeing some of that happening there. So if we take a look at ELA, 4th grade, we had increases ranging from 7 to 10% in the percent of students with average or above average growth in all of our individual groups of students. In 5th grade, in ELA, all our students in economically disadvantaged groups both had decreases of 4% in the percent of students with average or above average growth. And our Black African American group did have an increase of 6%. So then when we look over to the mathematics, in 4th grade, we did have a decrease, and our decrease is ranging from 6 to 14% in the percent of students with average or above average growth in all of our individual groups. And in 5th grade, we had increases ranging from 4 to 7% in the percent of students with average or above average growth in all of our individual groups. So as you can see, there's some celebrations in some of this data set, and there's areas that continue to grow. And as we come back in January, part of that report is really doing that analysis of all of this. So we will bring that more to you at that point. But I wanted to get this in front of you to see some green up there and some growth. And so really our most important work is really what we do to support our students. And a few of those action steps are listed up here on the screen. I just kind of want to talk through a few of those with you. So as you know, we're implementing a knowledge-rich English language arts curriculum. And just to update, we're in the third phase of our curriculum cycle, and we've completed the work around priority standards, so knowing what those standards are, proficiency scales to understand where we're at within that, and that has led us to implementing a knowledge-rich ELA curriculum. So we're first doing that through our early adopters, and then as we train the remaining staff during upcoming professional development days, during their grade group meetings this year, so that they are ready to implement the new curriculum beginning of the next school year. The work supporting this implementation and instruction has been critical, and that includes some of the following key components. One is our letters cohort, so that training around how reading works is a really simple way to say letters, is how reading really comes together. We have over 35 teachers who have completed both courses, which is over 2 years worth of work. So they've been engaging in really deep level learning for over 2 years, and 35 of our teachers have completed that. And there is so much there to be celebrated. It's been the best PD they've had. And we still have over 105 teachers engaged in that coursework. So even more teachers will be continuing to graduate and get that training. Coaching our new resources has been a big part of this, especially our UFly resource in K2, and then launching and supporting our ELA modules for the early adopters. We put a lot of time and support and coaching around that work for our teachers. In coaching, we are focusing on integrating coaching into the roles and continuing that work of several staff members, including our reading specialists, our engagement specialists, and recently our ESI support staff, so our academic support specialists, and 2 of our student support specialists who've been coming in and working on that coaching. And these teams attend our coaching collaborative training, and they're connected to our instructional leadership team. So we're really trying to pull all of that together and making sure everyone has what they need in the classrooms. We are focused on ELA instruction with the support of our reading specialists in each building, who are then supported by our district literacy coach. We have a focus on number sense routines and formative assessment in math. And this is done at the elementary level with our 3 FAME facilitators, which is the formative assessment work through Michigan. It is a project through the state of Michigan through NDE. And we have 3 of them in each of our elementary buildings, who then lead their colleagues through cycles of learning and application in that formative assessment process. So it's not just math, but we're anchoring within mathematics because we know it's very important that we continue to do that work. And then we have a focus on social emotional learning competencies. So our engagement specialists, that team has been rolling out the SEL competencies. They've been unpacking them, developing proficiency scales at our professional development days, and they just did one at grade group just in early December. And this is a time where the staff learns more about the competencies, and then they have that time to really think about how they're going to apply it within their classroom. So we're really being thoughtful in providing the training, the support, so that they can roll into the next upcoming year with the tools that they need and feel prepared. Another key piece that we're doing is we're providing tutoring for students experiencing homelessness, and then also mentoring our English language learners. So we have over 146 students currently in Portage experiencing homelessness. And we have just started being able to provide at the elementary level tutoring for around 23 to 25 of our students due to some grant funding that we've received, which is wonderful. This number represents about 50% of all students eligible for the program. And at this time, only 1/3 of our students experiencing homelessness are really eligible based on their academic and SEL needs. So that's great. That means that the other 2/3 are hitting the mark academically and socially, so they don't need the tutoring. So that's wonderful, and that we're able then to support the rest of them. Our English learners are receiving mentoring services from other English learner mentors. There was an article done on that as well. Both of these had great articles done on them just recently. And this is a paid mentorship program, which was made possible by another grant. This was a federal grant. And it's really pairs high school students with their elementary school peers who face the same language barriers and challenges in schools. The English language learner students are defined as those who are not yet proficient in academic English and speak one or more languages other than English at home. So we're really proud that we've been able to implement these two programs at our elementary level just recently. And finally, the last thing I want to touch on in our action planning is our collaborative teaching and learning cohorts. So now, we just heard from Johnny, being in that process of designing and building new facilities for Central L and Haverhill, we need to focus on being able to remove barriers and add opportunities for the best teaching and learning practices. So we're going to build new buildings, and we're going to provide training for our teachers to utilize those spaces. And in order to do that, we have created modules to assist educators in transitioning to a more collaborative, if you will, learning community environment. And working alongside these teams, we're developing a stronger understanding of those competencies needed to be a successful elementary team that's really working together in those spaces. And we're really focusing on how in those spaces are we connecting with students, reflecting in our practices, collaborating with our teammates, creating student-centered spaces, differentiating learning, making learning really visible, making learning fun and engaging, building meaningful community partnerships, engaging our families, and setting common expectations. And so far, we have provided these modules to grades K1 at both Central L and Haverhill, and second grade at Haverhill, and fourth grade at Central L. But we have a plan that by the end of 24-25 school year, all educators from these buildings will have been engaged in that learning opportunity. So we have a schedule that we've been developing. And it's been a really powerful learning experience from the participants. And we're really looking forward to being able to utilize these new strategies and the work that we're doing in the fall of 25, which will be here before we know it. And so as I mentioned, what I have up here today is just a snapshot of some of our action steps, and we'll be back in January to really summarize monitoring report 1.1 with that K-12 perspective. And at this point, I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
So I'm looking at these numbers, and my math brain flips them. In that I look at the number proficient, and then I flip it and say, okay, how many are not proficient? And that just comes from, I look at the economically disadvantaged, and know that for many, many years, my kids are considered economically disadvantaged. And when I look at, for example, the math here, just because that's the one that I'm open to, and I flip that number and it goes 81%, that says that there's that could lead to the understanding that there's an 81% of my children not excelling in math. And a conversation around that is never easy. So having taught students who were primarily Black African American in my classes, and they did well, and then I passed them on to elementary schools to say, hey, all that work you put in isn't, that's not great, because that's saying 91% might not be proficient at that point, and that's not real easy. And I know that you're putting in a lot of effort, and you have some amazing growth plans. So what specifically is being done for these economically disadvantaged Black African American, the students who are in one or the other of those groups? What specifically is being done for them?
Yeah, so I think those are great questions that as we start, those are kind of our action steps or big ideas of things that we're doing. When we start narrowing that in, I would say I definitely want to provide that to you in January, a solid analysis of that. But those are part of the process right there. Being able to, that use of number sense routines in our classrooms is huge. Being targeted and making sure that we're differentiating instruction where kids need it and entering in that point. And we start looking at, here today we look at numbers, right? what our teachers do is they look at kids and they say, okay, student, where are you at on their continuum here? What is it in the skill set? So we're learning multiplication. I've got to do an assessment here, and I got to back up and say, okay, what do I need to do in order to help you personally get to understand multiplication? And then they've got to back up and provide that instruction there. And it really goes to, we talked about that idea of acceleration versus remediation. If you remember after the pandemic, when we're like, okay, we have to accelerate the learning. We can't just stay put in one, like we're just gonna stay on addition forever. No, because multiplication's coming, division's coming, fractions are coming. So we need to accelerate that learning while continuing to do that piece. And so that is the work that teachers are doing in the classroom for those individual kids. When we look at these bigger things, I'd like to provide that to you in January as a bigger piece.
Perhaps this is a January question also. When we look at these numbers a year from now, what should we expect to see that will demonstrate that that has been effective?
Yeah. So and you're in the classroom too, so
Oh, I know.
you know this. And I think it's important to remember that it is a long game in all of this. It is consistency, it is structure, it is making sure we have the right curriculum in the place at the right time. And it may take, research is showing us, it will take 3 to 4 years before we really start to see this. But in the meantime, what we can probably start seeing are individual little wins that we'll start seeing. I don't think we're gonna see it like skyrocket and all that happening, but we will start to see small wins over time. I think you'll see our plans tightening up even more so. That's what I'm predicting we'll see, but I think we can provide some of that as well.
Okay.
Just some short-term benchmarks, but
That's good.
with the remembering 3 to 4 years of good implementation. Implementation dip, and then we should soar.
So in 3 to 5 years, what do you expect to see when you come and present to us?
Yeah, well, I'm hoping to see, I don't know. I mean, I want to see it all great, right? Like Kimberly, I'm like, yeah. But in 3 to 5 years, I would see that we have a solid plan in place. We've gone through a curricular review cycle. ELA has gone through the cycle. We have that solid. We have our math. We've talked about this now. This will be the third time of saying, looking at the data, we're going to have to switch things up and not wait 2.5 years in that curricular review cycle to wait to do that one. Then we're going to have to move that up in the rotation, which is what we do when we do school improvement, right, or district improvement. We got to look at what's in front of us, and we're doing that and saying, we need to switch that. So you'll see us, hopefully in that many years, we would have finished that process, and we're starting to see the outcomes of that change at that point.
I'm hopeful, especially like with reading with UFly and the science of reading taking effect. I'm definitely hopeful.
Me too. And the teachers and the kids are loving you. They're so funny. They're like, it's UFly time. I'm like, okay. So, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I will look forward to the piece you're putting together in January, because it will cause me to go back and check my memory, which may be wrong. But from my memory, when we had the high school results, we were kind of holding our own in there. At least in the middle, some higher, and I mean, board policy is we want to be kind of approaching the top of the peer group. And then the middle school data, kind of the same. We're holding our own. And then I saw numbers in here that are really gut-wrenching, right? And it's like we're like 7th out of 8, and not with all kids, but with some segments of kids. And it just, I just wanted to share, a bit of uncomfortableness, and we'll see. And I appreciate the detail on what's done, but I think for me is just hearing a sense of uncomfortableness and the fact that we got to figure some things out. And, and it's, I mean, our board policy is and I'm big on being reasonable because this takes time. So I think I totally buy that answer. But it's figuring out how to get back up there on these numbers so that we've come through the middle and we're kind of starting to approach the top ends. And I don't know if it's, I mean, a couple of the districts here on the elementary things, they're just outdoing the rest. And I don't know whether they've got certain factors at play or if they've figured some things out. It may be things that are out of everybody's control, but it's, over a period of time here is getting those numbers up to kind of on that end of the scale. I just wanted to voice that.
Absolutely.
I'm hearing it from you all. I mean, I think that's the most important thing as a trustee is there's a shared concern on these floors and figuring that out.
Yeah, I agree. I just wanted to ask a question as far as, do teachers really have time to offer individualized help to students who are struggling? So let's say they get their class list, the kids take the tests, and, I'll use my kids for example. Got 2 black sons in Angling Road, 4th and 1st grade. If they're at the bottom of the list not doing well, are they being taken aside and trying to come up with an individualized plan for them? Or is there not enough time to do that? Or is it kind of just like expected that they're gonna be at the bottom so that it's not looked at? I guess I'm just wondering, is there an individualized plan for each student who's not doing well?
So what we do is we use our MTSS process, so the tiers of support, so you have your core, your tier 1, 80% of your students should be fitting within that, and then you have your tier 2, which you might have 10 to 15% of students, and then your tier 3. So these are levels of support. So when we do our benchmark assessments, our Acadians, our FastBridge, especially those 2 at the very beginning of the year, we are able then to see where students are in the classroom.
Right.
Teachers then have meetings with their reading specialists, with their title support, and the team approach comes together. And so then they're able to say, okay, what do our students need? What do individual students need? What does the whole class need? And depending on what it is, will depend on what the teacher does. So part of the times we will have things called win time or tiger time, and we will have times where additional support comes in to be able to do that, where students then can have some individual group, small group or individual support on those specific areas in which they need, in which they might need support on. And then we can do some progress monitoring that will then tell us, and we don't ever want to keep a kid in a group forever. You use like 4 to 6 week cycles, check the data, see how they're doing, and be able to move them in and out as needed. So there is a system of support that exists in our schools that they're able to do that work, so that it's not just the teacher, it's a team of people coming together that do that. So that's like a big picture answer, but if you, so even our students in reading, you'll see that even though they got rid of part of the 3rd grade reading law, with the part of like retention, but we still, what we send home are those notes that say if a student is struggling, then we would have a certain level of support that we would provide for them. So we do that, and then we also have students that, what we're not breaking down here are students that may have IEPs or students that have 504 plans, or so those, all our students, we are wrapped into this data. And so depending on who the student is, depends on what level of support they're receiving. So we don't leave students just to figure it out on their own. We are there to help provide that.
Because I think that unfortunately for some students, even if their parents get, you guys send home the Acadians, whatever, FastBridge thing, they might see it, or their parents might not see it, so they're not getting help at home. So if we don't have the teachers helping at school to get them on some sort of plan, if their parents aren't pushing for it, there could be kind of a lack right there.
Our teachers are amazing.
I know it's a lot to put on the teachers, but yeah.
And it is really, and that's why like the work we're doing with the collaborative teaching and learning is so powerful. So it's not just one teacher working alone, it's the team of teachers coming together, so they're, so that then they're able to say, okay, I've got this, and you've got this, and we can do this in math because this is, my thing. I'll take this small group, you take this large group. And so we're really working on, closing that isolation and being more collaborative in the work. And so we'd like to work on that with everyone in all our buildings, but we know with our new buildings coming up, that's our first step in that training, but to answer that.
One last question that I did have written down, but I didn't bring up before. As a board, as I have been reminded regularly, both in the trainings I've taken and here, we focus primarily on policy And if our policy is well-written, then the students will do well. So I'd like to challenge you, perhaps, or ask you, and not expect an answer from you right now. Is there a way that we as a board can support you and the teachers? And is that through improving something in our policy? Because I want to make sure that you and the teachers as a whole really feel supported, and if we can help in making those outcomes incredibly successful in the 5 years, I'd like to know how.
I appreciate that. I wrote that down, and we will talk about that and take a look.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to piggyback on that because I was going to save this for, since I now that I know it's coming in January. But I would also look to those schools that we're seeing that strong success, do they have a policy in place that is helping them to be more successful?
Yeah, and part of that, I appreciate you bringing that piece up. One of the things that we are starting to do is making some phone calls to some of our districts. Our math coach and our EL, we're starting with our math coach. She's going and making some phone calls, and I will ask her to ask that question around policy to see if there's something there that we can.
You're doing a tremendous amount of work. We appreciate it.
Yes. Thank you so much for such a good presentation.
Anything else, sir?
No, that's it.
Okay. We'll move to our comments and communications section. Are there any citizens who have signed up to speak tonight? Thanks. Thank you, sir. We'll move to comments by board trustees.
Real quick, I had the privilege of attending the Portage Central Band, now I can't think of the name, but the concert, the Collage, thank you. Yes, that. It was fantastic, it was amazing, and for any of you listening online in the live stream, I've been told, what is it, the 15th, this Friday, that Portage Northern's having something similar, that if you missed Centrals, you missed something amazing, and so don't miss Northerns.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I just want to wish all my board members happy holidays, whatever holidays you celebrate, and especially Mark, as he's off on a little adventure over the holidays. So enjoy your families and time off, and see you here in January.
Thanks, Jerry. Anyone else? Well, I just want to say this is our last school board meeting for 2023, and I just want to take this opportunity to thank all our teachers and administrators, staff, all our employees for all the great work that everyone's doing on behalf of our kids, and wish everyone a happy holiday season, and look forward to seeing everybody back safely in January. With that, I don't believe we have any board committee reports. I believe we can move on to our consent agenda. And we have 3 items on the consent agenda tonight. The first is to approve the minutes of the November 30, 2023 regular business meeting. The second is to extend the contract with Raymond Robson to conduct the district audit for the fiscal years ending June 30th, 2024 through June 30, 2028 at a cost of $212,750 over 5 years. And finally, that we approve the Neola recommended operational policies 1540 and 7217 as presented. And as you recall, the second and third item we discussed at our meeting last time. Are there any exceptions to the consent agenda as presented?
I just want to say thank you for sharing the verbiage for the policy revisions with us.
Certainly. Okay, then the consent agenda is approved as presented, and we'll move to our first action item we've already completed. So now we're moving to our second action item on page 53, and that's to approve the elementary ELA curriculum purchase. Is there a motion, please?
President Van Antwerp, I move that the Board of Education approve the second phase of the adopted ELA curriculum resources for kindergarten through 5th grade teachers not to exceed $55,000. The funding source for these materials has been budgeted for in the Curriculum Instruction and Assessment Department's general fund budget.
Thank you, Terry. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Dr. Sheehan.
Well, good evening, Superintendent Beeling and Board of Trustees. I'm here to recommend that you approve the second purchase of our ELA curriculum resources for kindergarten through 5th grade. And this was budgeted through the Curriculum Instruction and Assessments General Fund budget last year for this year. And so we are now in the second phase of our process in purchasing. So we first purchased for our early adopters. Now we are purchasing for our remaining 131 classroom teachers, just to have their teacher core text so that they're able to take it to professional development, learn it from now until the beginning of next year. And then the third phase at the beginning of the next year, which will come in July, will be for the classroom texts. So this is the same units that we brought to you last year, but that also were at the Family Literacy Night and that we've been working with throughout this time. And really, we just want to make sure that the books that are part of this purchase arrive before the professional development days. And so that is why we're coming and asking you to review the recommendation and approve the purchase. And I will answer any questions you have.
It's just really fun for me to see so many tried and true books, like The Tiny Seed and the Very Busy Spider and A Wrinkle in Time, Freckle Juice, some of the things that are classics that, you know, our kids remember forever. And it's good to see that there's a good mix of all kinds of things here, so exciting.
And as we've been touring, it's been exciting seeing them in the classrooms and just the excitement coming from both our teachers and our students. So it's been really amazing.
Any other questions for Dr. Sheehan?
Thank you that the explanation for these was that these were for professional developments for the teachers. I had wondered and had questions, and that just answered everything. That just put everything in line. Thank you.
Okay then. All those who approve the elementary ELA curriculum purchase, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. Thank you very much. And we'll now move to our first discussion item on page 70, and that's a resolution for district planned use of virtual instruction days.
Good evening again. Paul and I are here to present the district's plan for the use of virtual instruction during the planned April 10 and 11, 2024 testing dates. That's for the PSAT, SAT, and ACT work keys. And now this is allowed under the current school State Aid Act, Section 388.1621F. And so the whole purpose is, one, to create the most conducive testing environment in our middle and our high school, and also to provide like a quality learning experience for them in terms of the non-testers on the testing days. So we'll start with Paula. She'll talk a little bit about the pupil accounting aspect, and then I'll kind of walk through what those 2 days look like, both from maybe a test taker and a non-test taker day. So go ahead, Paula.
So as a school district, when we go through our membership count days in October and February, we have a pupil accounting manual that we have to follow, so to make sure that we're counting the kids properly for membership. This past summer, the legislatures were very busy, and they revised the State School Aid Act related to that virtual instruction piece. And under previous law, before it was revised, when a district was going to hold virtual instruction, the buildings would have to reach out to the parent on an individual basis, and they would have to sign off on a waiver that they were okay with their child participating in virtual instruction. Well, based on this change now, the power has been placed with the Board of Ed to pass the said resolution in terms of what they plan to use virtual instruction days for. So, with the change in the law, a district can plan up to 15 days of virtual instruction that can be used for things like emergency closures, student testing, or professional development. In the resolution included in your board packet, we are only requesting at this time that we want to be able to use the virtual instruction days planned next April for the secondary level. Michael mentioned those testing dates are April 10th and 11th for taking the PSAT, SAT, and ACT work keys tests. Again, it only affects secondary and high school, or middle school and high school students, and we will be able to count those as part of our 180 days of required instruction. So that's basically why we're coming to the board, to inform you of this change. And the resolution was included in your packet, which would be approved at our next board meeting in January. So I'll turn it over to Michael, and he can explain like what the day will look like.
Yeah, just to give you an example, April 10th is day one. So on day one, we'll have our 8th graders taking the PSAT 8, we'll have our 9th graders taking the PSAT, and then our juniors take the SAT. So at home, we'll have 6th, 7th, 10th, and 12th grade. So they'll be doing a virtual activity, which I'll mention in a little bit. And then on day two, we have that, which is April 11th, we'll have PSAT 10 for our 10th graders, and then our 11th graders are back for the ACT work keys. So at home, we'll have our 9th and 12th, and there's no testing for middle school. So PSAT 8 is just on the 10th. And so from a teacher schedule standpoint, they help out during the morning portion with testing administration. They get lunch, and then they're available in the afternoon for the activities that I'm going to give you an example for both at the high school and both at the middle. So at the high school, teachers will provide instruction during the previous class period, so before the testing days begin. They'll release an assignment via Google Classroom on the day of testing. Must be completed by the end of that day, so at midnight, to be counted for attendance. The assignment must be related directly to the curriculum, so it's either going to be an extension or a review. It won't be new learning. Teachers will be available via Google Meet during the non-testing portion of the school day to assist students. So it's aligned to the amount of the time that they would have been at school. So back to Paula's comment about permission, students without permission to work from home will be required to attend. So we're going to send out a Google form to parents and guardians to fill out. So that's how we'll know who's supposed to be there and who's not. So on day one, teachers will be available somewhere around 1 o'clock to 2:40. On day two, somewhere around noon to 2:40, just depending on the testing day itself. And then for our middle schoolers on that first day, our 6th and 7th grade students that will be at home, they'll be assigned a career exploration assignment. That's in Zello. That's our college and career exploration online program. Our counselors will be visiting classrooms prior to April 10th to review what that is with the students and introduce the assignment. It will be released the morning of April 10th and will need to be turned in again by that evening in order for it to count. So same type of thing at the middle school. They'll send a Google form out in terms of permission to either work from home and whatnot. And we'll be running buses, that afternoon as well. So that kind of gives you the gist of what our test takers will be doing, what our non-test takers are doing, and how we can better utilize those days to engage students in an activity. Because typically they come, if they come in the late afternoon, and there's not a ton that happens anyway. So this way, if we can really structure it while students are at home and non-test taking, we'll have a better likelihood of them engaging in something that may be worthwhile.
And they do use district-provided Chromebooks for that virtual instruction. That is also another standpoint that has to be clarified in the information that the board is passing.
I think that's it. Any questions or comments on?
So if you wanted to use these kind of days, like on a snow day, for instance, can you do that, or does it have to be planned ahead of time and agreed to and all of that?
That would be subject to collective bargaining.
Oh, okay.
And I would have to turn that over to Brad at that.
No, I don't need another answer besides that. That's okay. I just was curious.
There are districts that are using this on snow days, and then they don't use snow days and they don't have to make up days. But there are districts that are doing this on snow days. That's why we're only coming to you right now on these testing days.
Yeah.
Because they're already, planned days, teacher reporting days that,
Right. Well, and like you said, when the other kids come to school and half the day's over and then they have 20 minutes for each class, there isn't much that's accomplished. So this is a good way of doing it. But I was just curious if snow days could ever go away. Or
But I think you'd have some pretty unhappy
Yeah.
students.
Yeah.
And teachers.
Yeah.
I mean, so to wrap this up, for me to understand this, reading between the lines, the current way it works is, that's kind of a low-value day for students, maybe, as a layperson to say that. And you're trying to, with this change, kind of add some value to it, right? So,
And protect that testing environment, so it's kind of two purposes. And I think it's an improved approach to what we've been doing in the past, so it makes sense.
yeah, good.
And we're the only district in the county. We tried to reach out to, we reached out to other districts, and, you know, Mark checked with superintendents, and I believe we're the only district in Kalamazoo County at this time that's doing this, so.
It just seems to make sense.
Yes.
Good, thank you. And now I'll move to our second discussion item. You stay right there, application for
Anywhere.
31AA funds regarding school safety and mental health.
Yeah, and this is just an update for the board. So we just finished, we completed the application for 31AA funding. Myself, Dr. Janine Messer-Gearhart, Paula and Sammy submitted the they submitted the application. We did some inputting, I believe it was due Sunday at 11:59. We got that in, correct, Paula? Yep, so we're all good there. But we wanted to kind of give you an update as to how those fundings look moving forward and how we plan to utilize them. So that's the purpose of my presentation tonight. So for 2023 fiscal year, the states combined Section 31AA and Section 97 into one grant. You've heard me talk about, even in the closed session, about how we're utilizing some of the safety funds from Section 97, and you've heard Janine talk a little bit about 31AA and how that was designated for mental health. So the district, we have been approved for just over $1 million, $1,014,502. The final award amount is going to be dependent on the number of districts or schools that apply. The application that we actually submitted was a little bit over that amount. In the event that other districts don't go for it, we had some other ideas as to how we would want to use those. So it really breaks down now into, it's all one funding source, but it's broken down into two components. Again, addressing student mental health needs, and then school and safety and security across the district. So our plans for the use in regards to the mental health piece is to fund our coordinator of mental health position. We have 3 nurses in the district that will continue to fund through this funding source, and then any professional learning related to student behavioral needs, so that could be our PBIS, trauma-informed practices, restorative practices. Those are some of the examples on how we plan and have submitted in our application to utilize those funds. On the other end, in terms of the school safety and security, we're looking at supporting our threat assessment, which is our CSTAG. You've heard us present on that. Our active intruder training for Alice, and then our reunification training. So go towards funding the professional learning and resources that we need for that. Any participation in school safety conferences, we have a district school safety team that I am on and lead. So anything through the MASA, Homeland Security, and a National Safety Summit, our team will look at attending those, and we'll be able to utilize those funds just like we did Section 97 to participate and look at new measures to add to the district as it relates to safety and security. Also for our emergency operations plan manual, Barb and I work together to revise that every year. We're working on getting that looked at and reviewed by local law enforcement, as well as our emergency management coordinator in the county, but we also want to develop some user-friendly manuals for our administrators, so that comes with a cost. So any supplies and equipment to help with the implementation of our processes and protocols. And then also anything that doesn't get covered with our current Section 97 funds, securing our entrances and vestibules. You remember our site assessment through the SEC that we did. We're utilizing our current funds to help drive a lot of those improvements. But if there's some leftovers, it'll be able to cover some architectural costs, construction costs, and any technology that may be related to that. So basically, they just merged it into one bucket, but we still have needs, and so, you know, Janine and I kind of got together to say, okay, what does this look like as we combined it? So it made sense that this amount actually would cover a lot of what we would like to do. So hopefully we're awarded at least that, but just wanted to give you all an update as to how that funding source looks moving forward and how we plan to utilize it in the future.
Thanks for staying on top of that. That's good work. Thank you.
And Mike, this is just an FYI, we don't have to approve the filing of the.
I believe this is just an update for you all.
Yeah, and to ask questions if you have any. It's just,
Oh, yeah.
it's just that these were coming in two different parts of the revenue pod, and now it's combined into one. And so if you don't hear about Section 97 any longer, it's because it's been merged with this. And we've received a lot of input over the years on how to allocate these resources. So we're going to continue to follow that input that we've received.
So when you hear 31AA, you say, is that mental health or are you talking school safety? Okay, thank you.
Good, thank you. Okay, our last item is we need to go into closed session to consult with our attorney on pending litigation. And we're going to go into closed session in the room next door, 1140, and we will not be coming back into open session. There's a motion on page 75, please.
Mr. President, I move that the Board of Education move into closed session for the purpose of consulting with the district's attorney on specific pending litigation by Leah A. Kofran v. Portage Public Schools et al. As allowed under the Open Meetings Act, 15.268, Section 8E.
Thanks, Bo. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. That's the roll call vote, please, Barb.
Mr. Kroll?
Yes.
Mrs. Crawford?
Yes.
Mrs. Navaria? Yes. Mr. Van Antwerp?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Ms. Hamilton?
Yes.
Ms. Larson?
The recommended motion is approved, and we'll move into closed session, room 1140. Thank you.
I think these are.